Hello everyone, my name is Evgenia Lisytina and I'm very happy to welcome you to my channel. And today our topic is portfolio. Yes, my friends, for many illustrators, a portfolio becomes a cornerstone. It's not clear at all where to even start, what to put in it, who to send it to, how to send it, and so on. I just decided to get back into the ranks of freelancers, so to speak. So I sat down and thought I should put something together, maybe post something on Behance, for example, or send something out, And once again, I got caught up in all these worries. So I decided to gather my own experience, analyze the experiences of other illustrators, and thought I'd share my thoughts with you on how to even approach the topic of a portfolio, and that's why I want to share my conclusions and discoveries with you. Maybe you'll find it useful too. Let's start right away with the first question. What should you show in your portfolio? Before you rush to gather your favorite illustrations, let's talk about why we even make a portfolio in the first place, and from there we'll figure out what to include in it. A portfolio is our opportunity to briefly tell others about ourselves and to showcase our level of expertise, so to speak, and our skill level. And it's very important to understand who we are going to send this portfolio to. Because, for example, when I came to Moscow, all green and new, looking for my first job as an illustrator, my mistake was this. I took one portfolio and sent the exact same version to all sorts of different companies. It didn't matter whether they wanted an illustrator to draw cute kids, or they needed someone to create textile prints, or they were looking for an illustrator designer. I didn't care. I just took the same thing and sent it everywhere. So what did I do? That's right, I made a very big mistake, because depending on the field, people expect to see a portfolio that matches that particular direction. So if we're talking about wanting to be book illustrators, then when we send our portfolio to publishers, it should reflect our goals and what that specific publisher is looking for. I think you get the general idea. And the most important thing before we even start putting anything together is to first decide what it is that we actually want to draw. This will determine not only what we put into this so-called basket of our portfolio, but also our style and even the way we present it. Let me explain a bit with some examples. For instance, magazine illustration or, say, book illustration for the European market will be completely different in terms of color palette and presentation technique compared to, for example, commercial illustration that we want to use in packaging or, in some very popular children's books. What do I mean by popular children's books? I mean books with super mass market print runs. Try going, for example, to a store like Detski Mir and see what kinds of books they have for young children, let's say for preschoolers. Everything there is as bright as possible. There's purple and all sorts of other colors, So these are two completely different trends, two different directions. And accordingly, the people who decide whether to take you on or not already have certain expectations. Among other things, they have a formed understanding of the market, specifically of this kind of illustration. So, my friends, before you even open Photoshop and start making your PDF, sit down and analyze the direction in which you want to work. This is the first and most important step. If you're just starting out, you can go look at examples on Behance or illustrators.ru, or even go to a bookstore to see what's out there, and so on. In other words, it's important for us to study the market we're planning to enter. If everything is already clear to you or you've already done this kind of research, then let's choose what will look great in your portfolio. What do I mean by that? First of all, of course, you need to select the work that truly turned out well, honestly, something cool and high quality. If you don't have any completed projects yet, you can always come up with a project, design it, and present it as a concept. When you're deciding what exactly to showcase in your portfolio, I recommend choosing several directions. Obviously, when you're a freelance illustrator, you can't focus 100% solely on book illustration. Of course, you need to do more in order to get more commissions. That's why, as a rule, different directions are mixed together. That is, we can create book illustrations, work on stickers at the same time, and also do things like packaging design or brand characters, for example, and so on. But it's important not to make a complete mishmash in our portfolio again, because we have to remember that clients are looking for something specific. So it's clear that if they're looking for someone to create brand characters, they want to see a certain number of examples of brand characters to see your expertise specifically in that niche. So let's focus on the areas that you do best, on what you enjoy drawing the most. And as for the things you don't enjoy drawing, even if they turned out amazingly well, even if it was a really cool project and it truly looks impressive, but you realize, for example, that you don't want to work with stickers anymore, then please don't include that in your portfolio. Because everything you put in your portfolio implies that you work with it and you will definitely get orders for it. Are you kidding? So, what topics should you choose, especially if you're just starting out on your illustration journey? It can be really hard to figure out exactly what to draw, what concept to create, and so on. This is especially true when we're talking about commercial illustration. What do I mean by commercial illustration? In other words, it's the kind of illustration that will be understood by the general public, by most people in the market. Please make sure to go and look at books, see what's being printed on textiles, for example, or what's being printed for the mass market, and so on. You should develop an understanding of what the mass market wants to see in illustration, right? Weird, awkward blotches, dirty colors, and so on. That's not about the mass market, my friends. That's more about other things like the Bologna Book Fair or something like that, right? So, as I mentioned at the beginning, you need to understand your direction. When we talk about a commercial illustrator's portfolio, there are certain themes that will always look appealing, because most often these are the themes clients will request illustrations for. For example, holiday illustrations, because many companies order branded greeting cards for occasions like New Year's. Many stores create special packaging for these holidays. Some people make special stickers, again for the holidays and so on. So the theme of New Year's and Christmas is very broad and is used very frequently. It's no wonder all illustrators are swamped before the holidays, because everyone needs festive illustrations. Literally just yesterday they forgot to write to you about it. So the topic of holidays is popular, it's often used, and it will look great in your portfolio. If we're talking about children's books, specifically in a commercial context, these are most often books for preschoolers. And most often they're about certain skills, for example, brushing teeth, schedules, or routines. These days, the topic of emotional intelligence comes up very often. So these are books about what I feel, how I experience things. That means we also need to be able to portray emotions really well. If you are specifically aiming for book illustration, it would be great to show several spreads that include the character, the environment, and a group of characters. So you can demonstrate, for example, that you have a main character, and this main character has a mom or a dad, and that they all share a consistent style and interact well together. By the way, if you want to learn how to create characters that are lively, cool, and emotional, and can form the kind of group I just described, be sure to check out the character design course. There we go through the entire system together, and it contains all the fundamentals you need to be able to draw awesome characters easily and confidently. Another area is brand characters, which is a very popular topic because everyone wants their own brand character. It makes things much easier even for advertisers, because there's always someone to present to your customers, someone through whom you can communicate with your future consumer. And it's a great thing for making stickers or, I don't know, some kind of corporate merchandise and so on, right? When we talk about brand characters, I highly recommend also using mockups, not just showing how beautifully we can draw the character, but also presenting them from different angles with various emotions, right? And additionally, showing them on some kind of product. In general, when we talk about portfolios, I highly recommend using mockups, because our clients are usually not illustrators, they're not designers, and they often lack, how should I put it, the imagination to picture our illustration on a commercial end product. And when you make things easier for your future client by showing them, look, this is how the book could look, or look, this is how these stickers could look, then that's a big plus for you, a like, and I think gratitude from your future clients. As for the structure of the portfolio itself, I would definitely recommend organizing everything as project-based stories, right? That is not just a single image, but tell a little bit about the project, at least in a few sentences. Especially if, for example, you plan to submit this project to Behance, there you can give a very detailed description. In general, take a look at how everything is presented on Behance. In other words, each project is essentially like a separate portfolio where the brief is explained, the steps of how the project was developed are described, and the final result is shown. And at the end, by the way, be sure to include your contact information in each portfolio because it's important for us to immerse the viewer. By immersing them in our process, we demonstrate how skilled we are as experts, that we didn't just randomly decide that this boy should have blue pants, but that we know exactly what we're doing and that it's based on the client's wishes. This shows that we can accomplish the task the client has set for us, right? That's why it's essential to make sure that our project looks complete, that there's a logical structure in how you present your images. This way, of course, you'll look much more impressive than if you just had a random assortment of images. And of course, I highly recommend including in your portfolio those illustrations that meet the commercial demands of your potential clients. So if you're great at drawing elves, dwarves, orcs, and so on, any kind of fantasy scenes, something really super fantastical. That's great, that's awesome, it's just wonderful. But it's unlikely that the client will be interested in looking at that, especially if it doesn't have any commercial relevance, right? It's a different story if you have a book about little elves who help a child, I don't know, find a sock, that's one thing. But when you just have a random standalone illustration about, say, an elf wandering through some magical forest that's no longer a commercial story, no one is going to try to figure out why that elf is there, what he's doing there, why he's needed there, and so on, right? So if we're talking about freelancing, if we're talking about commercial illustration, we have to start from the needs of the market. But cool little elves? Well, you can show them off on your Instagram, for example, get some likes, and that's not bad either. Of course, illustrations like these help develop your imagination, let you use some cool effects that you can later apply to your commercial work. But again, the first question is, where could your future client commercially use this illustration? That's what we start from. That's what we look at to decide whether it's worth showing this illustration or if it's better to keep it tucked away somewhere. Another point I'd like to discuss with you regarding portfolios is the choice of the niche you want to work in. Let me explain what the problem is, so to speak. There are, let's say, different levels of difficulty, kind of like in a game, that are inherent to different fields. For example, there's a field of working with stickers, where we take a single character and draw a certain number of scenarios with them for specific tasks. That's one option we have. And there's a certain amount of knowledge you need to have for it to look good, be cool, for the character to feel alive, interesting, and so on. There's another field, for example, books. In books, besides the character, we also need to be able to draw the environment, other characters, and know how to work with spreads, that is, to be able to alternate them in different ways, to understand the structure of the book, and so on. So this is already a different set of knowledge you need to have in order to work in this area. And for example, there's the field of animation where you're already a character designer for animated cartoons. And in addition to creating the design, moreover, different cartoons can have different styles and you need to be able to adapt to that style. So you need to know even more in order to work in this field. It also happens very often, especially with new projects, that character designers are required not only to draw these characters in vector, but also to prepare them for future animation. That is, to rig them, yes, in the appropriate software. This is a completely different set of knowledge that you need in order to work in this field. We also have game development as a separate area and so on. So you need to understand what stage you are currently at. And based on that, decide what you will showcase in your portfolio. If, for example, you are aiming for game development, but you clearly realize that you currently lack the necessary expertise, you shouldn't create concepts as if you already know how to do everything, right? And it's unlikely that you'll actually be able to create such a concept because, as I mentioned, there are a lot of hidden pitfalls there. So it might make sense to start with something simpler and then gradually, step by step, move on to more complex things, right? So analyze your work in this regard as well and see what you want to focus on and aim for at this stage. Now, let's talk about how we can showcase our portfolio, shall we? The first option is to use specialized platforms to present your portfolio. That means Behance, illustrators.ru, Dribbble if you work with vectors, and so on. That's the first option. The second option is if we are reaching out to someone directly. For example, let's say we want to illustrate a children's book and we've boldly decided to go for it. By the way, it's perfectly fine, it's normal to be bold and send your portfolio to different publishers. For this, I recommend using the PDF format because people rarely actually click on links. And besides making sure the PDF is well designed and professional, you definitely need to write a short cover letter. Who are you? What do you do? And so on, right? In other words, show why you're interested in working specifically with this publisher, that you know what this publisher does, and so on, right? So just a short note, it's not a 20-page essay, but at least 3 or 4 sentences about how you'd love to collaborate with them, specifically with this publisher, right? And remember that different publishers work with different types of books. You also need to take this into account when you want ding. So to speak, when you want to enter this niche, for example, we have small publishers that work only with a slightly more art-oriented, not exactly highbrow, but more European-style books, where, again, gray colors might be used, some interesting shapes, and so on. That's one option. Another option is a publisher like Phoenix, which works for the mass market, and there the illustration style is completely different. So, before you send your portfolio, please familiarize yourself with the works that the publishers have already released. This way you can understand whether your style is a good fit for that particular company. And when we create a PDF, there is also a certain structure that helps the publisher better understand what this portfolio is actually about. Of course, when the portfolio begins, you should start by telling a little about yourself, your background, what you do, what your goals are, and so on, right? Next, regarding the illustrations. Overall, I recommend including no more than 15 pages because no one will ever actually look through a super large portfolio. It's exhausting and basically it's just a waste of time. On one page, of course, you can include several illustrations and it's great if those illustrations are from the same book. So, for example, you label them as illustrations for such and such book, and then you have 3 or 4 illustrations on a page. This way you can showcase several projects like this, right? If you had a large project, you can dedicate 2 or even 3 pages to a single project. But make sure it doesn't look boring. It's important for you to show that you can work with both characters and environments, right? Show that you can depict different planes, that's important. Show that you can draw things like food, for example, because food often appears in books as well. In general, you need to show that you can draw everything necessary to make the book complete. And as always, of course, you should put your best works first, that is at the very beginning. And also, at least one of your best projects should be placed at the end. They will be remembered best, because everything we put in the middle kind of gets blurred and isn't remembered as well. But if you start off with a real bang, with a vivid story, and finish it all with a beautiful final chord, your portfolio will look much more impressive. And of course, at the end, please don't forget to include your contact information, links to your social media, and to Behance as well, where your future client, for example, can see more illustrations and more of your work. Overall, that's probably everything I wanted to say about portfolios. The most important thing is don't be afraid. Yes, there's no need to be afraid. Everyone started somewhere. Not everyone managed to make something beautiful right away. In general, over time, you'll start reworking your portfolio. Yes, that's how it goes. A portfolio isn't something you put together once, forget about, and then send out for 15 years. No, because over time you grow, your direction changes, your style evolves. That's completely normal, and your portfolio should also change and reflect exactly where you are right here and now. That's why the skill of putting together a portfolio is actually a really valuable skill for an illustrator. I get it, I'm the same way myself. I always put it off until the very last moment. It's really hard for me to get started on this because it's always tough to make yourself go through a large amount of information, search for and dig up old projects you've long forgotten about, and so on. I completely understand you, and I really sympathize if you have to do this urgently right now. But my friends, the more we do it, the easier it gets each time. So if you're putting together your first portfolio right now, please just do it. Don't try to make it perfect, because it will never be perfect. Let it turn out the way it does right now. Later on, you always have the chance to improve it at any time. So try to ease up a bit and approach this more pragmatically. Right now, you just need to put it together for a specific purpose, and that's it. In any case, you'll do better than if you don't do it at all. So let it be as it is, even if it's not perfect, as I've already said, right? A competent art director or client will always be able to spot their future collaborator. For example, I don't even have a portfolio right now. I only have my social media. I haven't posted anything on Behance in ages, and yet people still come to me and ask me to do projects simply because for a client who's really looking, social media is often enough. But if you put together a solid portfolio, first of all, the level of your clients will definitely go up because big companies don't really browse, or at least rarely browse, social media. There are certain platforms where it's simply easier to find people, and because of that, the quality of the projects and of course the price you can charge both go up. So my friends, let me say it again, don't be afraid. It is what it is. There's nothing to worry about. You can always redo things if needed. Again, there's nothing dramatic about it. The main thing is to gather your thoughts and you'll succeed. You will definitely succeed. I wish you success in this. See you in the next video. Wishing everyone lots of creative inspiration, and bye-bye.